Moving along here, we're excited to bring in a few things that talk about some of the practical implementations that are being put forward out in the ecosystem. And so we're very lucky to have a couple of stories about these deployments. The first of which I'd like to invite up Fernando and Todd from MetaLink, and they're going to talk about a PAL deployment and give us some insights there. So, Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you and Fernando, and take it away, please, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Alan, and good day, everyone. My name is Todd Harpist. I'm the External Affairs and Regulatory Director for MetaLink Technologies, and joining me this afternoon will be on the presentation will be Fernando Torres, our company's Operations Manager. We happen to be at another conference going on at this time, so we're both sharing the presentation here from our hotel room. So with that, next slide, please. On this slide is a few of the local rural communities in Northwest Ohio, Northeast Indiana, and Southern Michigan that we serve. Next slide. MetaLink Technologies has been serving customers since 1996. The corporate mission statement is committed to deploying innovative broadband technologies in our local communities. Just like you've seen on that previous slide, that's we're still doing that today. As a rural internet service provider, internet technology is being deployed through the use of licensed and unlicensed wireless spectrum and through the use of fiber optics. Today, we serve more than 12,000 customers. Next slide. Thank you. Closing the digital divide required additional spectrum to reduce capacity issues related to two good things, which were continued growth and providing higher package speeds. For a period of years, the FCC had done little to open up more spectrum. Licensed lengths such as the 6 gigahertz, 11 gigahertz, and 18 gigahertz were being used for middle mile, but the only option for the most part for the last mile was unlicensed. CBRS was the industry's first hope of a lightly licensed spectrum to be used for last mile, which would provide frequency interference protection while helping to alleviate congestion. Thus, we became an earlier adopter of the CBRS by applying for an experimental license. After a while, we saw the value of CBRS, but slowed down our deployment of the then 3.65 gigahertz and CBRS-ready equipment, Telrad, until the FCC solidified the rules for a second time. After being intrigued with Google to be our SaaS of choice, we approached Telrad requesting that they work with Google to provide a CBRS service. While there have been some bruises along the way, while being on the leading and sometimes bleeding edge, now with our pals in hand, we have ramped up our rollout of the CBRS spectrum to continue to close the digital divide. At this time, I'd like to hand the reins over to Fernando to discuss the technical side and then open it up for questions. So with that, if you could go to the next slide as Fernando takes over from here.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for letting us share, a high-level overview of our deployment. I just wanted to touch a little bit on the technical, again, very high level. But as Todd mentioned, just want to mention, we got a fixed wireless deployment using all Telrad base stations, Telrad user equipment, and we partnered and using the Google SaaS. And one of the initial deployments that definitely helped us out was a single step registration. So when connecting new customers, doing new installs, very important for us, to do that very timely. So by Telrad and Google just working together, they developed this single step registration where, again, just an installer goes on site, connects the customer, and again, everything's automated all the way back from the equipment to the SaaS. As Todd mentioned before, there were some bumps along the way. I guess a pro and a con of having an existing, 3.65 gigahertz network is that, you've got existing customers online. They're connected, they're live. So when we won our PAL channels through the auction, it's not an easy just push of a button on a base station and move over to your PAL channel. There's some things like customers, were cell locked to particular channels on base stations. And so moving to the PAL channel was not that simple process. We had to ensure that, when we start moving to those channels, that we're not disrupting service. We do utilize both GAA and PAL spectrum on our base stations today now. So part of the benefit of that is that we're able to ramp up those base stations and do 40 megahertz per sector. And what that means is initially it's a very realistic 100 meg offering now for a fixed wireless CBRS deployment. Next slide, please. So what does today and into the future look like? With having more PALs, we're upgrading more existing locations with that spectrum. Again, just adding more 40 megahertz base stations out there and doing more high bandwidth speeds. And then of course, with having the more spectrum to do that with, we're actively deploying new sites, every day. The other things we look forward to is, some of the enhancements and improvements that both Telred and Google are looking to do just to kind of keep optimizing the deployment of the PALs, with their back-end systems. One of the things I know that I wanted to share was, Telred developed what we call the split grant methodology. So basically allows us to deploy, PAL channels and GAA channels on the same cell. And then last but not least, we continue to invest in R&D into different things like Category 12 CPEs. What does that mean? Well, it just means more higher bandwidth speed plans for our customers as the demand keeps growing. So again, just very high level. I know that's kind of short, high level overview, but if folks have questions for us or like us to go more in detail, then by all means, we'll be more than happy to take questions. And then our contact information on the next slide, to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to share our experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando. Thanks, Todd. Appreciate that. Are there any questions coming in, Josh, for Fernando and Todd? Oh, you're muted. So, but yeah, I think you said no.
No questions.
All right. So if there are questions, Fernando and Todd, we will capture those and forward those on to you if folks gather them after the fact. So
Very good.
Thank you very much. Very, very insightful and appreciated. That's very interesting.
All right. Thank you.
Good deal. So next presentation, I'm going to move on over to friends from Geoverse. And Tasso, I believe you're going to be speaking with us next. Yeah, hi, Tasso.
Hey, hello. How are you?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so looking forward to this as well. So we're going to turn it on over to you and take it away, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Thrilled to be here. What an exciting event. Thank you so much to the Alliance for hosting this and for inviting me. My name is Tasso Zagrafos. I'm Vice President, and I lead the transportation and logistics vertical. And thrilled to be giving you a little presentation here on what we're doing at container yards and give you some context into the domain. So with that said, let's get started. So in the world of supply chain logistics, container ships are getting larger, and they're able to handle more container capacity. In fact, the top 10 ships out there today cover or can handle 20,000 containers. The top 1 and 2 over 24,000 containers. and HMMM, Hyundai Merchant Marine, Algiers, and Copenhagen are 400 meters long. So you can imagine 4 football fields long of containers hitting a terminal yard. Let's go to the next slide. When these container ships hit a terminal yard, there's a lot of activities going on in a limited amount of space. So you have a limited area to handle offloading and onloading containers off a ship, a large ship. You've got to stack them and keep inventory of those containers. And then you've got to process those containers and put them on trucks, either receiving containers from trucks arriving to your yard or transporting them. And safety and speed are important in trying to find that balance. Next slide. So I talked about more strain on processing these loads. These are heavy containers that could be up to 80,000 pounds nominally, and some even larger. And safety is a big concern around intermodal yards, as is speed, right? Trying to move and process containers on and off trucks on a daily basis. And so the staff need to be highly coordinated with management and the drivers, who are mostly independent operators, on call to a terminal yard. Next slide. And then, of course, just-in-time delivery requires more demand on drivers to pick up or deliver as many loads as they can in a day. They're really taxi operators. They're not long-haul movers. They're short-haul from a logistics center in and out of port terminal yards on a daily basis. So they need to do 2 or 3, sometimes 4 load transfers a day. Next slide. So the whole ecosystem around a port terminal operation involves really the premise that it's limited land use space. Usually these ports are around metropolitan areas like Los Angeles or Oakland or Seattle or New York. And you have more container ships arriving, and they're bigger container ships with a lot more containers on them. And then on the other end, you have a lot of logistics centers who need to handle these containers and transload the shipment, the container goods inside onto long haul trucks or delivery trucks to other local stores. So you have these 2 pressures that are squeezing the limited land use space. And the big problem is how to best increase the volume capacity that the land use space can handle and the throughput performance that it can handle as well. In other words, can you handle more containers on your limited space yard, and can you process them more quickly? Next slide. So here's an example of a metropolitan area. You have the city of Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area, surrounded with Berkeley and Alameda, and the port of Oakland buttresses up against the city housing elements and its infrastructure, and it's constrained. It's not like you can add more land easily. You're not going to tear down neighborhoods to add more land space. And then this land space services primarily the Central Valley. So in and out of the Port of Oakland is the transfer of containers to the Central Valley warehouses, also to the north in Napa, to and from in San Francisco, and Silicon Valley to the south in San Jose. So a lot of goods get transported in and out of this limited land space 24/7, 365 days a year. Next slide. So within a terminal yard, there are a lot of equipment that need to be manned and operated, some fixed, some mobile. These Tyrannosaurus Rex or huge forklifts that move 80,000 pound containers as if they were simple boxes. It has a real safety concern, and speed in operation is important in trying to move performance. You also have the processing of screening, Custom and Border Patrol screening containers, and also gate access control. Not everyone can get access freely. And then you have land mobile radios and tablets for staff who are doing inventory. And through these stadium poles, you have cameras around the entire network, as well as sensing and other IoT devices. all of this equipment needs to be connected. All of these endpoints need to be connected somehow. And this is where private LTE CBRS plays a major factor in bridging these elements. Next slide. So one of the key issues at a terminal yard, and this is video I shot from my own vehicle, is through the transportation network in the port environment. And truckers arrive with their container goods either to drop off in this case, and then also to pick up as well. And lines can be over a mile long. So a driver can arrive, not have advance notice of the conditions, and end up sitting in line trying to get into a terminal yard for up to 3 hours. And then once inside, because of the congestion, the ability to have enough staff to process loads may also take another 3 hours. So you can imagine that 6-hour, what they call turnaround time from the time they arrive to a port to the time they leave a port, can impact how many moves you do in a day. Naturally, you'd want to go to a terminal yard that doesn't have a long line to it and isn't so congested. That would be key. But trying to get the information out to drivers in advance is a little bit of a challenge, especially when most of them are independent operators. Next slide. So here's where private LTE CBRS, we think, can provide benefits. In the initial service, it would be really helping terminal operators do better inventory management and asset management. Right now, it's more like a Rubik's Cube environment of knowing where your containers are stacked, which ones need to go out next. So you don't have to unstack to the bottom container, restack, and then find that you have to go to the next bottom container because the next truck wants that unit. So managing that operation. The next slide, the next opportunity is speeding up the process through the gate check-in, check-out process. You know, this is critical infrastructure. Drivers need a transportation worker ID card to get access, which is issued by the Department of Homeland Security. And they need to validate who they are and which container they're picking up and for which beneficial cargo owner who owns those goods and which drayage company that they're contracted under. So expediting this process is key to optimizing the performance. And the next opportunity is last mile advance arrival information. So being able to educate either dispatchers or drivers as to the conditions at the port so they can optimize their time in doing other things, because congestion is a killer to performance. Next slide. So here's how we're working with terminal operators to leverage private LTE using CBRS. We're working with a container yard operator to manage both inventory management, gate processing, and last mile arrival. But we're also linking it with other yard operators as well, who run their own independent business. But as demand fluctuates between operator of a terminal yard A, B, and C, they can collectively integrate and communicate with each other to leverage their resources more effectively in handling demands that fluctuate as well. Next slide, please. One of the key challenge, you know, in any RF environment is, you know, we call it in streets urban, having these canyons basically, and, you know, stacked containers that are stacked 5 or 6 high. Basically, it's like having 5 or 6 high story building along a short, narrow corridor. And so one of the challenges, making sure you get coverage through these canyons will be key and is critical in our deployment. And we're factoring that in as we implement in our container yard operations. Next slide. The other one that I touched upon was last mile advance arrival, and that means extending the network out to points where vehicles will be arriving. Arriving from San Francisco, we'll have a Treasure Island point, or up north on Berkeley, so that when drivers come down to the south into the terminals area, the port area, and also from south from San Jose, Silicon Valley into the terminal, they can provide last mile arrival information in advance of their arrival. And that is also to notify folks what they're arriving for or delivering to the yard, so that the staff in advance can start to prepare for that arrival, not only to improve the gate check-in process, but to situate the containers to be ready to expedite the processing of those containers and to minimize the wait time and turn times in these terminals. Next slide. So we spoke a little bit about the problem statement. We have more and bigger container ships, more product being moved, more product needed to be received by these logistics centers locally, and you have the limitation of land use space. So the challenge there is we can't expand the land use, so we've got to optimize the way we handle the volume capacity and improve the throughput performance to be able to deal with the demand. And the solution to this is really, it's a bridging solution. Our private LTE CBRS enabled network is really a bridge between all the front end edge apps or communication devices to the back end business operations, which are proprietary to the most part to the user. And this will help them optimize the limited space utilization they have, expedite the in and out gate processing, and to reduce wait times, which will improve the performance of the overall ecosystem around port and terminal operations. With that, this pretty much ends my presentation. And again, I want to thank the OnGo Alliance for the opportunity to speak and present our use case scenario here that we're implementing at the Port of Oakland. Thank you very much, Alan.
Yeah, Tasso, thank you very much. Fascinating, and I'm also glad all the animations work so well. We were, all holding our breath a little there, but that really did drive home the nature of the problem and also the solutions that we need to come up with.
Well, thanks to your staff, by the way. It was really a pleasure working with them, and appreciate the opportunity.
Good deal. Thank you, sir.
And if there are any follow-up questions, I'm happy to take them after the fact. Please feel free to contact me at any time. So
great. Thanks, Tasso.